you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a committee meeting of public services. And with me as chair, Bess Rich, is Joel Daves and CJ Small. And I see Councilwoman Gina Gregory. Is there any other council? I don't see that. So that's the council president. We also have our council attorney, Chris Aldridge, with us, and our city clerk, Lisa Lambert, is with us. And I don't know if my screen, whether we can go around to introduce ourselves, but I always like to do that at a committee meeting. So I can see that Keisha is at the top of my row, and I don't know how it's going to work. So just chime in as soon as there's a break when someone introduces themselves, so we can keep up with who's present and what utility. Keisha.
Hi, good afternoon. In fact, I'll introduce our entire team. That way,
Great.
Skip all of them. But I'm Keisha Davis, and I handle governmental affairs with Spire, the natural gas company. Joining us today will be Sharon Moffitt. She is our regional manager for Spire. Tyler Stewart, who is our manager for pipeline management. Richard J., who is our area manager for construction engineering, as well as Monica Garcet, who is our manager for economic and business development. So they're all on the call today.
All with Spire. Well, thank you very much for taking time to be with this council. Appreciate it. Paul, I think with MediaCom. I'm not sure your audio is working.
Yeah.
Well, we know we have MediaCom. Okay, and we'll just keep going. I think Jim's next. DeLapp.
Okay, thanks, Councilwoman Rich. Jim DeLapp with the City of Mobile, and with our team, with the city, we've got Shayla Biko, head of our department head for our Bill Mobile, Nick Amberger, the city engineer. I see Matt Anderson from the mayor's office, also overseeing all of our museums. Shane Cumby from our permitting department, and Flo Kessler from our legal department. And I also see Jennifer White, our traffic engineering. And let me just scan the rest here. I think that's most of the people.
Okay, thank you. Next, I think it's Clinton.
Okay. Clinton Johnson, I'm the community relations manager with Alabama Power Company.
Do you have any other officials with you today?
It's just me. I feel like I need to send a couple of emails real quick and get some people to jump on here with me. This might be the only time one Alabama Power person.
You'll be fine. Okay. There's a Monica.
She's with she's with Keisha.
Spire. Okay. And Linda?
It's Linda St. John.
That's
okay.
Me.
All right.
I'm with the Village of Spring Hill. I'm just here listening.
Great. Okay. I see a number, and I don't know if it's with somebody.
Yeah. If it's 38436, that's Richard J. I'm with Spire Energy.
Okay. Thank you. All
Yeah.
right. And then we've got, I think, and Sharon Moffitt was with Spire. Did I have that correct?
Yes.
Legal, and our city council executive secretary, Jada Dukes, is with us. I don't think I'm missing anybody unless there's somebody else on that's not into the screen. There is anybody.
AT&T on, or any of the other AT&T, any of these other phone companies?
Not yet. I did send them. I did send the email to Glenn.
Okay.
About
maybe.
Yes, this is 205-470 is Glenn Agnew.
Okay.
That's Glenn.
Comcast?
Yes. Anyone from Comcast?
Who were you in touch with? Was that Comcast you were in touch with to give us some numbers a while back?
Yeah, I've been in touch with a guy named Ronnie Colvin.
Here in the past.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We did get a written report, but it's a while back, but they were productive. Okay. we have evolved from first talking, this committee at least, talking about abandoned poles in the rights of way, and AT&T was a big player in that. And I think we'll just turn to that to begin with on our updates and any information that is needs to be shared with this council about their concerns about those poles and the responsibility of AT&T. And Alabama Power, excuse me.
Bess, could I just ask a few questions?
Yes, of course.
And Mr. Johnson, thank you for being here today. Very much appreciate it. And I want to once again thank Alabama Power for the absolutely stupendous job they did restoring power after our 2 hurricanes last year. That was subject to a resolution that the council passed. And again, thank you and your team, the entire Alabama Power team, for the really remarkable job you getting power back on.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Now, I've got in hand the latest report, and I want to thank you for producing that for us, because it's really very helpful to have the numbers. And a couple of things stick out at, and let me make sure that I understand it to begin with. You have on the right-hand side, you have this little box, and it says, I think what it's telling me is that 85 poles were pulled in 2016, 327 poles were pulled in 17, 755 in 18, 653 in 19, and 1,161 in 2020. Is that correct? Those
That's
are
correct.
annual numbers?
Yeah, those are annual combined numbers for the years.
Let me make sure. So you pulled 1,161 poles in 2020?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, really tremendous progress has been made, and I want to start off by thanking everybody that's been involved in this. When I come over to the box on the left-hand side, I notice that Comcast still has its, I don't know what you call it, but still has its material, or whatever you call that stuff, attached to 784 poles. And frankly, I thought, based on the reports, and I'm not kicking Mr. Arledge, I'm just saying I had thought from the reports we had gotten that Comcast had done a better job than what I see here on removing its equipment from our poles.
So what I'll say is, yes, they have done an excellent job, and that number can be a little misleading in the fact of, for example, we'll just use AT&T because I see them on this spreadsheet. So let's assume that AT&T is on 300. They have 319. If they remove all that stuff, if Comcast is on that, then those poles will fall to Comcast next to remove their material from the poles. So that's kind of a number. It can increase and decrease just depending on the works of all of the companies and what we're doing. For example, we're at 451, but if someone finishes 300 today, our numbers will jump up by those 300s once they put those numbers into the system. So that's kind of a rolling number, I guess you can say. That's not indicative of the work that the companies are doing. And I will say with all of them, AT&T, Comcast, Mediacom, we are all working very well together, the process, the communication. And I would say most of us are probably working as hard as we can to get them done when it allows. So I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a bad number to be, because if they finish 200 and put in the tickets today, then we're going to jump up. Alabama Power will jump up there. We're ready to pull 200 or 300 more. So that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad number. I don't want to look at it as a negative. That just means that we're just continually doing work. And as every company continues to do work, those numbers will increase and decrease.
Yeah, but what we were looking at, and I know you're relatively new to this job, but what we were really looking at was to see these numbers in this left-hand box trend down over time.
Well, they won't trend down. So if necessarily, just depending on the work, let's say we had a lot of capital work done, and with Alabama Power, we were doing a lot of work downtown and then throughout Mobile. So those numbers, as we changed out poles, we were increasing the number of poles that they would need to remove from. You can also think about with hurricanes, and like we said, the 2 hurricanes that came through in September and October, when those poles were damaged or something and we had to put up new ones, but we had to leave the old ones to allow for those companies to come move their lines, we could increase the number that way. So the numbers can trend down, but they can also go back up, just, of course, like I said, depending on the work that Alabama Power is doing, or companies that are doing when it comes to the poles. So I don't think I'll put it this way, I don't think you will ever get to a number that's 0.
No, I understand that. But
and I believe that number is probably less, and I don't have them in front of me, but just looking at probably the last report that I probably sent, I think Councilwoman Rich asked for a couple of months ago, that number is probably, I think, a few hundred down from what it was. So the work has been getting done on that end of them, for them. And not to speak for you, Glenn, I'm sorry.
Well, and I'm not necessarily complaining. I'm just trying to understand. Okay.
Yeah.
So you have, Alabama Power has 451 poles that are ready to pull. Everything's taken off of them. They're just sitting there, they're like ready to be pulled. Then the number of poles that still have someone attached to them is at least 784, because that's the number that Comcast is still attached to, right?
Yes. Okay, yes.
And it could be more. In other words, there could be some that Comcast isn't attached to, but AT&T is attached to. So we really, we don't, we know it's somewhere between 784 and whatever this is, a little over 1,000 altogether. Would that be correct?
I think that is a way you could look at it. Yes, sir.
Okay. And my recollection, Mr. Johnson, is that when a pole, when Alabama Power stops using that pole, the way the companies take their equipment off, it starts from the top of the pole and goes down. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's usually how it works.
So you could have 319 poles that Alabama Power was on top of Comcast, which would mean that Comcast couldn't take its equipment off because Alabama Power was sitting on top of it. But still, that would leave 470 something.
Joel, you need to look at your audio. See if you snap it on and off or something.
I think your internet connection messed up, so I honestly didn't hear anything your statement on that one, Councilman Joel.
Yeah, it froze up.
Maybe just kill your video, just go to audio only for a second, Joel, and then that way we can maybe hear
you.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I don't know where I was when y'all lost me.
You said 470
about
poles.
The order that they come off and what would be left.
Yeah. So even if AT&T was above Comcast on all these poles, that would still mean that Comcast had 470 poles or around something like that where it was on top of. So it just seems to me, Mr. Arledge and Mr. Johnson, that we need to continue to stay behind Comcast, because they're the ones that are there. They're the ones by far that are still attached to most poles. Comcast is, and that was the case when we last looked at this, whenever it was 6 or 9 months ago. And progress has been made, but it's just one of those things. The minute your eye off of it, I think that'll start backsliding. Everyone needs to, and I understand the hurricane would have affected all this as everyone was out there trying to get their poles back in order. Can I just can I mention the lines for a minute, Bess, while I've
Of course, sure.
one of the things I'm concerned about, Mr. Johnson, is that there are some places where lines are down as a result of the hurricanes. Not, in other words, lines that are attached to your poles, but not power lines. And I know I have called Alabama Power and reported it. There's one at the end of my street that's been there since September 15th on the ground. And I know there are others around the city. And I wondered what steps Alabama Power is taking to make sure that those lines are picked up and dealt with.
Well, I know that we have, like I said, with the when we do know and when those get reported, if they're not ours, the communication, we kind of put them into the system, and the communication between the companies on whose line it is or that needs to come look at it. That is put on how we are, that's how we communicate with the other companies. We're probably, because I've heard that one before from at a different meeting. I know we are working on that to kind of improve that process. That falls in our power delivery. I don't necessarily know they have a more improved process at this time, but that is something we're working towards. But if you know of some and you see some, I know you said one is on your street. If you send me an email, we'll make sure that we're checking into it. And when I find out more detail of how that process goes, I can make sure to communicate that information back to you.
Okay, I don't, they're not on every corner, but they are lying around the city, and I didn't use my example as a means of getting mine taken care of ahead of time. I was just using it as an example of one I knew about. But I'll email you the load of that. Just let me make Mr. Johnson, let me make kind of a general statement on this whole issue, is that, we began this effort several years ago under Councilwoman Rich's leadership. And as I said, significant progress has been made. We still have a lot to do. I feel that Alabama Power is the sole licensee to erect and hold these poles, has a responsibility to the city to be active in getting all this equipment off the poles, getting the unused poles pulled, and making sure that the poles are maintained by their licensees. By these folks are attached to Alabama poles by the lessor, which is Alabama Power. And so Alabama Power has some overall responsibility in my mind with respect to the maintenance of these poles. And you can't just, and I'm not saying you're doing this, I'm just saying Alabama Power can't just shovel it off to companies to use those poles. You got a responsibility too. Our council attorney, Mr. Arledge, uncovered a city ordinance that I don't think anyone's looked at in a long, long time, that allows the city electrician, whoever that is, to order that. And I don't know that we necessarily need to do anything about that right now, but I think it's, in my mind, it would be important to continue to see improved performance in getting these poles removed and maintained. And otherwise you force the city council or the city into taking action to try to fix it themselves. We're not there yet. But I think everybody wants to avoid a legislative solution to this problem. But again, I've talked for a long time. I'm going to hang up my phone and let someone else talk. But I very much appreciate you and the other representatives joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate your passion on this. And it's for aesthetic and safety reasons. And since we've got Alabama Power here, let me ask some questions if I may. I know that there were some very heavy leaning poles that were on our very well transferred boulevard of Airport Boulevard. And I noticed that Alabama Power worked diligently to get better looking, steadier poles. But the ones that are still sitting there that have your extra licensees on your franchise with your poles, and without, I'm sure some of this is privileged, but what is the timeline that once you put up a brand new pole, is there something contractual that they then have to switch to it, or can they just, choose to do it whenever? Do you know how that works? Can you give us some guidance on that?
You asked me the one question I probably do not know the exact answer to is I don't necessarily think there is we don't say once we remove it, you have 1 week to get out there and move your stuff or anything like that. Because as we show, we could be working at 10 different locations, depending on where the crews are in the Mobile area. We could be working at different locations, changing out poles, what we're doing it. I don't necessarily think there is a time. As soon as we are ready or when they are done, we do put them into the system so that they know it is ready. You all can come move your lines to the new poles to get that reset so that we're able to move them. Now, even once they are redone, it just depends on a number of things. Like right now, when we say that, like over the holidays, we'll use the example when you have Thanksgiving and Christmas, you had the hurricanes, you're dealing with COVID, which is affecting more of them since they're at work, working together, being on quarantine, you're just not able to get to them as fast or as you would like to at this time, or in certain periods of time. So I don't necessarily think we have an exact time on you need to get this done within a week or 2 weeks or anything like that.
All right. Well, I think then Councilman Dave's comments about the city stepping in is because a lot of those poles that were replaced were leaning and looked as though they might create a danger. So there's the liability because it's sitting in the city's way and it's on city property. I don't think we necessarily have to be, having laws in place, but that is on the books. And without any our participation in your agreements for, how you ask people to transfer, we're looking then at double poles as opposed to, getting less poles in better condition. So would there be someone in your hierarchy that the council could approach or legally to talk about some of those implications of your lease agreements that might put people at risk?
I've written down the questions. I'm taking notes on the questions, and I'll make sure to get you an answer for those. And if we need to set another meeting or bring in other people in the hierarchy, we can make sure that we do that for the next meeting to make sure we can answer all the questions that you all have raised.
We understand that there's like certain people can move when the next person moves it off. Yeah. So that's another thing that also is all within your private sector on figuring out how quickly things get done. But then we're hearing that there's not even something that gives your co-locators a timeline to move to the better standard pole that's in better shape, and they're not forced to do it in any certain timeline. Do I have that clear? I don't want to put words in your mouth or get something wrong.
Yeah, yes, I don't believe it's necessarily a set time. They have to be off by a certain time.
Okay.
But
go Joel.
That was my understanding from our previous meetings when Jill was here, was that they when Alabama Power gets off the pole, they enter it in the system. I forget what the name of the system is, but they enter it in the system, and then the people that are attached to it are supposed to start working through that. And the problem we had was Alabama Power would put the new pole down, move their lines to the new pole, put the pole in the system, and then crickets. Nothing happened. No one took their stuff off of there. And there is no timeline. They just.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And that's something that the city couldn't enter or be part of course, because it's on a, they've got the agreement to be in our right of way, but it's not the city's facility. Okay. Yeah, we probably need some more understanding because.
Which is why it's important that Alabama Power be proactive in staying behind these people to get their stuff off of Alabama Power's poles.
Right, I
Because
agree.
if Alabama Power just sits back and does nothing, the licensees.
Yeah, we're looking at double poles. We get, exactly. Okay, Gina, do you have any? Oh no, wait. Let me go to CJ if he's still. I can't. CJ, do you have any questions as a committee member?
No, I'm good. I'd just like to thank everyone for coming out and participating in this meeting, Spire and Alabama Power. But Alabama Power, you got to get up like Spire and bring you a team the next time.
Yes, sir, Councilman Smalls. I'm learning from Keisha every time I see her. I'm going to take notes.
Yeah, that's a good example for you to follow. Gina, do you have any questions that would be directed to Alabama Power? Because then we're going to move on to some of the other utilities that are with us.
Yeah, just a couple, and we've already touched on a couple of these. We were looking at the order of how the equipment comes down, and I think I know the answer because we've talked about it. But there is no specific order on your lines. It's not like it's always Comcast, then AT&T, then MediaCom, then Spire on down, because that would seem like it would be pretty obvious on how to get these folks moving along a little quicker. But that's not how they're up on the polls. Is that what I'm hearing right?
Not necessarily. Usually though, it's Alabama Power is always going to be the top one.
Yeah, but then
whatever the feed is that regulates the size of the pole, then is usually reserved for, let's say, AT&T, and then for whether Comcast, MediaCom, it's not necessarily who's the person, because of course the company can be a little different. But usually it's no set on everyone, but it's usually about the same on each pole. Yes, ma'am.
So since we have so many double poles in the city, and I think we looked at the numbers, it looks like maybe Comcast is kind of holding up some of the progress that we're making, or some others, I guess, who are number two in the pecking order on those polls. But I also thought I heard you say that we'll never get to zero. So we'll never get to a point where all the old poles are taken down and we have new ones up.
Well, you got to remember, you'll have a drunk driver who hits a pole, and we'll go have to put the pole up on a Saturday night, and you'll have a pole, or you'll have a storm knock out. So when I say you'll never get to zero, there's always. I would love that we'll never change a pole. Hey, we'll save some money on operations then, or capital, but you always be in a situation where you will have to change out a pole. A pole will be old. A pole could be lean and weather. So that's what I mean. You'll never get to zero. There'll probably always be a continuous. And that's why I say with the numbers can be continuous, in that someone can be at 200 a day. We could be at, like I said, our numbers can be at 450 right now, but we could jump to 800 next month. And that's not necessarily saying that we aren't out there doing it and picking up and going as fast as we can. It's just how the items are getting removed. And so that's why I think if we look at the numbers just on the improvements that have been made, I think since Councilwoman Rich has put this committee together and asked us to be diligent in this effort, if you look at the numbers that we put in 2020, I think they're about the same if you combine, or more if you combine 2016, 2017, and 2018 together. So the improvement is there. The companies as a whole, we are working together, and we are working, I believe everyone is working as hard and as diligent and as fast as possible to make sure that the poles are getting removed. So even though the numbers look high, I don't want that to make it seem like we aren't out there doing it, because the numbers are improving and steadily improving, almost doubling as we keep moving on throughout the years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone with the administration that has any questions about Alabama Power, or anything that you can share about our city's position on this administratively?
Just real quick, Councilwoman Rich, this is Jim DeLapp with the city. I really want to second kind of what Councilman Dave stated, which is, the big disconnect, at least I see as we go through this, is that, Alabama Power seems to be very proficient at managing their lines on their poles. The disconnect and the breakdown seems to be, once their line's off, having a way to enforce or incentivize the other utility companies that are on there to expedite getting their stuff off of that pole. And so that we get rid of the extraneous old poles and expedite their moving of their communications and other lines to those new poles. So I think that's really it. That's where the attention needs to be, and having a means for them to, incentivize them to do that quicker and manage it better, but also perhaps a way for the city to be able to monitor or have an access so that we can view the system and the status of those. So if we could look in, share, we can get a report or be able to look in their system and say, hey, we see this pole, it's in our right of way. We see you're off of it. We can look in the database and see you told Comcast to get their stuff off 90 days ago. What's the timeline they have to do it? Once it hits a certain threshold, then we should have some ability to enforce that. If they start to bust that limit, they have to have it off within a certain time frame. Then that would help. So those are just a few thoughts, a few things running through my head as we're going through this. And I realize they may not exist today, but they probably do. You probably have pretty good fidelity on that, know when your stuff's off and how much time you're giving them. I don't know what that timeline is, but there needs to be something reasonable, and we can't just let it go on, because otherwise it's just a bunch of emails and phone calls back and forth to keep hounding people, and that doesn't work really well.
Yeah, Colonel DeLapp's idea of the city having access to this database that Alabama Power maintains, where they go in and they replace the pole, and then they tell everybody that the poles, start taking your stuff off. I don't know what that looks like, but that might be something worth looking into.
I agree. But it's getting Alabama Power, which is the owner of the pole and the franchise agreement, to make sure also that there is some kind of timeline. I really think that could be impressed. I think that's a fair thing in utilizing our rights of way, especially when the pole was taken down because it was leaning or had some kind of unsafe measurement to it. So, that puts the city, I think, strongly in the center of everything, because should that pole fall, and we've already pointed out that it was leaning or whatever, then it's almost like it's a legal obligation and a risk management too. It's not a tree, but it's a pole that could cause harm. Yeah. And and if it expedites getting off those other and moving to the more sustained pole, that would be something very good for the city. I know it would be more work to oversee that, but there has to be something. There has to be a tool in place that gets those second poles that are not being used by the main franchise holder to have everybody else switch to it if they don't have that in their agreements. So,
Councilwoman, if I may, just one last point is that in an example where Alabama Power may be taking off their power at the very top of the pole, which was the original intent or purpose of the pole, and then the other one, everyone else, hangs off of that. When they take it off and let's say move it underground, which, we're doing that on St. Louis Street. They've done that already on St. Louis down certain sections and moved it over a block. There's no incentive for the utility companies, other utilities, to be getting off there. There's actually a disincentive for Alabama Power to hound them, because they're still getting paid.
Yes.
The people have their stuff on that pole that they're not using anymore. So their power's still running. They're still getting money off of that pole being there and the folks hanging their wire off. So again, I think there needs to be a timeline. When your stuff's off, there should be an established timeline that says utilities have X amount of days, if depending on who different area, because of a big project. Well, that, there may be a variation to that, but there should be some general standards to that.
Yeah.
That's what we'd like to see.
That's an excellent, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience, well, not audience, on our Zoom meeting that utilizes the polls and has some information they'd like to share with this council? They can just speak up.
Towards MediaCom's role, I mean, we serve a very small portion of Mobile city limits, but looking at over our engines tickets, that I'm assuming the database you're referencing from Alabama Power, looking at the engine tickets, we have a small number of open tickets right now that we kind of prioritize. Some are older than we would like to see, but for our point, or our area inside Mobile, we don't have a large number due to the hurricanes that have happened, things slowed down. But generally we're given, if I'm not mistaken, 30 to 60 days to pull, transfer, move.
And is that your corporate decision, or is
the Alabama Power's joint use agreement we have, our poll contract with them, to see if they set specific guidelines? I've requested to be pulled. I'm waiting for it to get sent to me, and I'll review that to make sure. I know in the contracts I am aware of, a lot of EMCs or power companies will set guidelines on when those poll transfers.
Yeah. Do you have any independent polls besides the ones that you co-locate with in our city limits?
No.
Is there anyone else from any of the other services? Is AT&T present?
Yes, Glenn Agnes here.
Okay.
The system you're talking about, we all use, is called the engines. We call it engines. It's the national in the middle, and telecommunications are on the bottom. So, and they go down. So power will put a ticket into the engine system and say, okay, they will put a ticket into the system and say, okay, it'll become the AT or telecommunication provider, and we'll have so many days bottom.
Sure.
And you can, in any one, you can have access to that national joint, the engine system, so you can see that also. We do have some polls in the city. From the second half, you have the first, well, for all of the polls, AT&T polls throughout the city for 2020. And we try to get off the poll. Once we get a notification, engines ticket notification, we try to get off the poll within 60 days. That's our goal.
Okay. We're holding a sheet from Alabama Power that shows AT&T with 319, and this is as of January.
The way like I said, the way it works, it would have come from whoever's above us, where we are now ready to get off of the poll. So we would be working those. Like Clint said also that, back in June, when we sent a report, we only had 22 ready to pending trans, and now at 319. So it constantly changes throughout the year.
Okay. And not necessarily any kind of agreement with Alabama Power, though?
That is what we try to, I don't know the exact agreement. I don't have the contract in front of me, but that is our goal, try to get off within 60 days after we receive notification. And it wouldn't necessarily be from Alabama Power. It would be from whoever's above us, which might be Comcast, MediaCom. So Alabama Power would put an engine ticket in, it would go to whoever's next below them. And then once they're finished, we go to whoever next below them. And then typically we are at the bottom. We're on the bottom, the last one.
And Glenn, you said that this this engine information is available where someone can look up, or is that just privileged to your industry?
No, it's not privileged. It's called a National Joint Utilities Notification System.
Is that the one managed by GuideStar, or is there more than one of those?
I am not aware of more than Glenn or anyone else. There's only one that I know of.
I'm not aware there's more than one either, Glenn. Engines is just I always say. So I'm assuming it's that one. What I will do, not to cut you off, Glenn. What we will do is I've already requested to make sure the timeline and look at the joint use contract for you all, and I will find out the exact for engines for you and send that information over to you also. Great.
I think I'm in it now, or getting into it right now. So we'll hopefully we'll see.
Hey, Bess.
And those numbers might be Mr. DeLapp, those numbers might be a little different because like I said, that was January 7th. So we could have taken polls down, put more up and all that stuff since that time.
That's fine.
Joel, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I have a clarification question. What I understand Glenn to be saying is that this engine system, someone could go into the engine system and ascertain on that system how many polls we were waiting on Comcast. In other words, how many polls were sitting out there and Comcast was the next person to remove their stuff. And how many polls out there were waiting on AT&T as the next person to move their stuff. Is that correct?
Yes.
In theory, yes.
Okay, so let's go back to this spreadsheet that we got from you, Mr. Johnson. And it says Comcast 784. Is that the total number of polls Comcast is attached to that are waiting to be removed, or is that the number of polls Comcast is on the top, the immediate person to remove their stuff?
That's the number that they need to remove. They're next to move. Now that's also, so when I say that number, that's why the number is different. That doesn't mean AT&T is on all 784 of those polls either. Comcast could be, yes.
But so Comcast has to remove its stuff from 784 polls before anyone else can start removing their stuff.
Yeah, or if they're the last ones on that poll, for us to move the poll.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay. So it still looks to me like it's still Comcast and AT&T that are, and I'm not necessarily criticizing. I'm just trying to figure out what you do is you try to figure out where the issues are, and it's really with Comcast.
To have the highest number of, even though the poll's ready to go, according to this list.
According to this list, that they've got to remove their stuff from 784 polls before either the next person can pull their stuff or the poll can be pulled. 784. That's a lot of.
They're a big player in this factor, regardless of where they are on the poll. Exactly.
And they're not.
And then you have, do we have anybody with TWT level 3 CenturyLink? Were they invited? Were they on the list to come? Because they have 112 that they need to pull.
No, I don't have any contact information for them.
Okay, we probably need to get that somehow so that they can be included and give us updates and know that we're watching the shop there. And how about Unifiber and Harbor Communications down to 1? They don't have to attend.
Yeah, no, the real,
the big one is Comcast.
Yeah, Comcast is a really big one.
Yeah, MediaCom, very good. I don't know how spread out you are in our city, but your number is 36. So yeah, you're good. Okay, on the ready to pull, I have a question. That's 451. That means all of those utilities have come off, all of the licensees, and you're due to do 451. They could go down whenever, correct?
Yes,
they're ready to go.
Ready to pull means it's on us to get a crew out there to remove the
all
poles.
left those poles.
Yes.
Okay, I thought that's what it meant, and it's pretty clear on your sheet. Okay. Is there anybody else that wants to ask about the polls or any information they would like to share with this committee, or ask Alabama Power or AT&T? If not,
Yes, we do want to get to the sidewalks at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Chris, did you have anything you wanted to put into the equation?
Yes, ma'am. Do y'all want a background of my dealings with Comcast on this?
Yeah, I was looking at that letter. It goes back to December. That's the last letter I have. But yes,
Yeah, it actually started last summer. There was a spreadsheet like this, or a list like this floating around that was dated July 15, I believe, and it had 1,425 Comcast transfers required. Reached out to a contact I had with them through a totally unrelated matter, and got somebody to pay attention to it, and had a phone call with a couple of those guys. One of them's name is Ronnie Colvin. I think he might be the government relations guy. And then there was a Michael Reed, who's construction manager. And they formulated a plan to address their issues, and it got delayed a little bit by the hurricane. Not only the hurricane here, but I think there was one out in Texas or something. I think what they were doing was bringing in a contractor or something to take care of theirs. But in any event, eventually in December, I got an email from the guys and said they had completed 2,122 pole transfers in the city and surrounding area, which I don't know what all the surrounding area means, which covered the original 1,425. And then right before this meeting, I sent the same guys the new list, and his question, I haven't heard from one of them, but the construction guy's question, he wanted to know or understand when those poles had been put into the system, the current ones, and they says that they work from the engines database. So he's going to look into the 784 is what he said.
Okay.
But this is the construction guy. I don't think he would have been on the invitation list for the meeting. And then, so that's what they said. And some of that, like I said, I don't know when all it was generated, but they have made some progress. Just not quite as much as.
Right. I thought that number would be better based on our December information. So you're still out and about. If it's okay, I know we have a citizen to discuss some concerns about what utilities do to our infrastructure, but you've got a big group with us. And if you'd like to give us an update on your initiatives or anything you'd like this committee to learn about your work in the rights of way, we'd be most appreciative.
Okay, well, I'm just going to talk about, introduce the subjects, and each person will jump in and chime in to talk about what they have going on in their areas. But first, we're going to talk about the update to our AMI installation, an update on our cast iron replacement projects within the city limits, an upcoming project concerning St. Stephen's Road, and an update on the status of the gas light issue that you probably heard about in the news. So we'll start with Sharon, and then we'll just follow that list as we go along. Sharon?
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Spire is in the process of installing an AMI system, which is automated metering infrastructure. And we have, since July of last year, been installing ultrasonic meters and also transmitter units on the meters for the ones that are not being traded out to the new ultrasonic meters. All of these will allow us to read the meters a whole lot faster than we are now. We are still reading meters by foot for the most part, but we currently have a 40.2% saturation rate of all of our meter reading routes. So there's only about 60% of the routes that are now being read manually or by foot. The rest have been converted, and we have 64 of the routes that are 100% converted and 50 routes that are greater than 90% converted to automated meter reading. And so that leaves us with about 170 or so meter reading routes that are left to be switched over to AMI. We're working off of a planned completion date for the device installation of May 31st of this year. And what we'll see as a benefit will be, of course, on the company side is faster reads, because we'll cut down by 78% on the time that it takes to read the route. So a route that currently takes 9 hours by foot can be done in 2 hours. The benefits to our customers are more accurate meter reads, because we're eliminating the human error portion of it. And when the towers are in place and our entire AMI system is up and running, we will be able to get instantaneous reads from our customers and also do remote lock-offs, so that we don't actually have to send people out to take care of those things for us. Another benefit for the customers is the ultrasonic meters are smaller and more aesthetically pleasing than the old style meters, because they have such a smaller footprint. So that's where we are now. We have yet to install any tower units so that we can go to true AMI. But in the meantime, as we convert these routes over with the new equipment, we will increase the number of accounts that are being read by a vehicle driving through the neighborhood. So that's where we stand on AMI.
Any questions on that before we go to cast iron replacement? Any questions?
Good.
Okay, Kyler, you're next.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We are concentrating. We have 4 phases that we've divided the downtown area with. We have roughly about 4 miles of cast iron that we're replacing this year. Phase 1 is, I'll give you a brief border. Congress to the north, Dearborn to the east, Broad Street to the west, and St. Francis Street to the south. Phase 2, which phase 1 is completed. We have renewed the entire system in phase 1. We're working on actually retiring that gas system, that part of the gas system this week. Phase 2, the borders are Beauregard to the north, North Franklin Street to the east, Washington Street to the west, and St. Louis to the south. Phase 3 is Congress to the north, North Claiborne to the east, Scott Street to the west, and St. Louis to the south. And phase 4 is Adams to the north, Royal to the east, Claiborne to the west, St. Louis to the south. That will finish up the cast iron gas mains that we have in the downtown area on the east side of Broad. We're targeting finishing that up by September of this year. That's our goal. That's really what we're working on right now. Those are the areas that we're working on, concentrating on replacing.
Any questions on cast iron replacement? All right, we'll move on to an upcoming project concerning St. Stephen's Road. Richard?
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to give you some information about the St. Stephen's Road project, like Keisha mentioned. This is a project that's going to be constructed along Chastang Street. We're going to place new steel line from Chastang and Mobile Street to Chastang and St. Stephen's Road. We're also going to place a new steel main along St. Stephen's Road from Chastang Street to Craft Highway. The reason we're doing the project is it allows us to maintain an appropriate cathodic protection level on that section of line. And that section of line is what we refer to. It's part of our 87-pound system that runs through that area of town. But more specifically in that project, we're going to place about 2,500 feet of, this is along Chastang Street. We're going to place about 2,500 feet of 16-inch steel line. And that'll be on the east side of that right-of-way in the grass shoulder. Along St. Stephen's Road, we're going to place about 700 feet of 16-inch steel line and about 100 feet of 12-inch steel line. That's going to be placed on the south part of the right of way, but the majority of that is going to be right along the edge of pavement or in the eastbound lane. But altogether, that project's about a $5 million project for us.
Okay, any questions on that? Okay. And lastly, Monica Garcet with the status on our gas lights.
Hello. I just wanted to update you all. We are at the request of the city and Nick Amberger, we are doing a top to bottom review of our gas light process, our billing, our maintenance, the gas lights that we have on city accounts that are non-metered gas lights that we bill for and that we light and check and those kinds of things. So we are currently meeting every Monday morning, the high level managers at Dolphin Street, and discussing how we can move forward with this. We're making a lot of progress, and hopefully we will make this more efficient, more effective. We're proud of our gas lights in downtown Mobile and the beauty that they bring, but we need them working and burning as much as we can, and we're putting great effort into that right now. So hopefully we'll see great progress.
Any questions on gas lights? All right, well, that does it for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all that information about your service to our citizens. Appreciate it. Is there any other utility that would like to speak up that I might not be aware is present? I think we've covered everybody, if I'm not mistaken. At this time, I know we have a resident that has something of interest and also wants to talk about our rights of way and infrastructure and perhaps even damage to it. And Linda, are you ready to go? Are you still with us?
I'm here. Yes, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I just want to sort of preface my comments with a little bit of history. Sure. In the 16 years that we've been have started the Village of Spring Hill, we have initiated over $4 million in sidewalk infrastructure in Spring Hill for the city of Mobile. We have to apply for state grants. They're very, very competitive. So when we get them, we're very fortunate. We feel very fortunate that we've been able to get the grant in itself. After we get the grant, we are responsible for raising all of the engineering, surveying, and 20% matching funds for the projects. So roughly each one of these projects, we have to raise in the private sector over $60,000 for every single one of our projects, which we do in several different ways, but it is not easy to raise $60,000 in any environment, especially the current one that we're in. The sidewalks being constructed right now in Spring Hill have taken us, they were started in 2017. So they take a long time. This one's 3 years in the making. So far, like I said, we've initiated $4 million in sidewalk infrastructure. So having said all that, it just hits a little bit of a nerve with us when we see the utility trucks parked on the sidewalks and damaging the infrastructure that we've spent so much time and so much effort putting down. And we don't, unless we catch them on the sidewalks and then go back and see the damage, we don't have any way of attributing the damage to the specific utility. Having said that, I would like to say that since we've kind of been on this mission to try to make the utilities responsible for it, a lot of the utilities have been very receptive, you know, to the sidewalks. They try to pull off, they try to put cones out, but a lot of them do not. And, you know, we're faced with confronting people who work for these utilities as private citizens, which sometimes they're very nice and sometimes they're not very nice. And also another problem is that maybe the information is not getting down to the people who are actually doing the work, that you should not park on the sidewalks. It is actually against the city ordinances for anyone to park on the sidewalks, even though it's on city right of way under the power lines. So another big problem with that is that even if the communication gets down to their specific employees, they hire subcontractors that come in from all over. I'm not talking about the hurricane incident because I know that's kind of a special circumstance, but contractors are hired from different cities just to do general maintenance, general repair. They don't understand that you cannot park on the sidewalks. That information is not getting to those subcontractors of these companies. And so, like I said, they're parking on the sidewalks and they're damaging in the infrastructure. And then the only way we know is if we've taken photos and sent them. Glenn Agnew has actually been extremely helpful to Sherry Pierce, my vice president, in being accountable for any AT&T damage. And so we just kind of want to bring it to everyone's attention to try to do a better job in their businesses to help the people that are actually doing the work understand why this is such a sensitive subject. And it's not just in Spring Hill. I mean, you walk anywhere in the city of Mobile, and this infrastructure is extremely expensive to put down. And if I do work in the city right away, I am required by the city of Mobile to present a traffic control plan. And I've got to put cones and I've got to hire people, to get around that construction. And I think that that should be something that is broad-based and applies not only to us, but to anybody who's doing work in the city right of way needs to do a construction plan, a traffic control plan, and try to keep those trucks off the sidewalks. The sidewalks are only 4 inches thick. They are not 6 inches thick like you have when you go over a driveway. They are not of the structure to support these trucks without damage. They will get damaged. So that's my soapbox.
And you're exactly correct, because we're building sidewalks all over the city because it's such a priority with citizens. I don't care where you are, you want that access. And I would be curious if Colonel DeLapp has can give this committee an idea of when someone comes forward to work in the rights of way, what is required and what information does the city share or need to have from those contractors. Obviously, Linda's group goes by the letter of the law and presents everything, but I would assume that would be the case with each, contractor. But if we could get an understanding of that, what the city's mission is, I think that would be very helpful too.
Thanks, Councilwoman. I'm actually going to defer to Shayla and/or to Shane to respond to that one, because they'll have a little better fit audience.
Sure.
Typically what we tell folks when they get a permit to do work in our right of way. But I think the comment, and I think I think it's not before they do, I think it's not out of the question for us to routinely remind utility companies in whatever venue we want in writing, whatever. And when we give a permit to say, to remind them not to park on our sidewalks. And if there's any damage, I'm sure there's a requirement for them to make the repairs. So, but I'll defer to Shayla and/or Shane.
Shane Cumby is our right-of-way manager, and obviously this concern has been brought in this forum to us. So he has instituted some measures to try to address that issue. So I'll ask that he speak directly to those.
Shane, you're muted.
There we go. I was trying to hold the space bar to see if that would work. Good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, since the last time we met, we've implemented a couple of procedures. So just kind of give folks a little bit of background on how this works. For most permits or for most work that they do in the right of way, especially that's in the ground or affecting the surface level or underground construction, utility companies have to submit for a permit. And so my department, traffic engineering and urban forestry, all three of those departments review every right of way permit that comes in. And through that review process, they are required to submit a traffic control plan when they are obstructing traffic in the downtown area. From time to time, if they're going to be blocking sidewalk for some reason or another, they're supposed to submit a pedestrian traffic control plan. But, you know, if they're not planning on obstructing the roadway, most of the time, you know, what occurs basically, they're saying they're not going to obstruct traffic, and therefore traffic control plans not put together, because it more has to do with how they're going to flag traffic that's actually on the roadway. And so, I mean, you know, a lot of this, you know, I'm going to defer some of this to Jennifer White's group, because they're the ones who set the terms of what is reviewed for traffic engineering. But since we last met, one thing that we've been doing is continuously, you know, my inspectors, us in the office, have been encouraging people not to park on the sidewalk, that it's against the city's ordinance. And we've also added notes into our standard notes that explicitly state that they are not to park on the sidewalk, and if they damage it, they're obligated to fix it. Outside of permits, there's a lot of aerial work that, you know, Alabama Power, AT&T, all the folks that are on the poles, they do work that does not require a permit. Basically, maintenance and overhead lines, they don't have to come and get an explicit permit that says this is what we're doing. But instead, they are supposed to notify traffic engineering if they're going to be out there and obstruct a lane or block street, and they're still supposed to submit a you know, a traffic control plan. So beyond what we already do, the only thing that I would know to add to this practice is for them to demonstrate, you know, a mobilization plan showing, you know, how and where they're going to park. And a lot of this comes down to behavioral and cultural issues. And it's one of those things that I think is going to be a constant work in progress, just like many other things that we do in the right of way. And just like what Linda was saying a minute ago, the very difficult part about this is that, you know, while it's against the ordinance to park on the sidewalk, and it's also against the ordinance not to repair damages that are made, even incidental ones, while you're doing work in the right of way, the real difficult part is, you know, catching people all over the city in the act of actually parking on the sidewalk, being able to pin it on them and be able to prove that the damage occurred from their act of parking on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is for what we get in permits, there's explicit notes and conditions that we put on the permit that reminds the permit holders not to park on the sidewalk. We've been vocally advocating for them to not park on the sidewalk and use other means. But like I said, you know, I think this is a larger cultural and behavioral, you know, kind of issue that is, it's hard to maintain, and it relies on the integrity of the utility companies, you know, to work with us in trying to avoid damaging sidewalks in the city.
And Shane, so just to wrap up, I'm glad we've put some notes in the permit request for those that we think may do that, to tell them. But it sounds as if doing a traffic control plan is probably one, time consuming, and two, expensive for them. And so their alternative is, we're not going to block traffic if we pull our truck on the sidewalk or off on the grass. So,
I was thinking the same thing.
You're
That
exactly
works.
right.
So,
Yeah.
So that's kind of the no-brainer. So bottom line is we have to, and as you know, Nick and I have talked on this, you know, certain communities have better sidewalks than others, and a lot of our sidewalks are already broken in. So they're saying, hey, what the heck? I'm just going to pull up on this thing anyways. It's already cracked up and broken, and we're working hard to fix them. But as we fix them, because they have those bad habits, we don't want them to break up our new ones. So, so yeah, we've got to do something more. We're going to have to look at that for all the council members and everyone on the call. You know, we've got to do something a little more explicit about this, and not just let them circumvent the thing by not submitting a traffic control plan to allow them to pull up. Now, there's a lot of times they probably need to be off somewhere into the grass or, you know, off on the road, because they got to get their bucket up in to do stuff. But that, I can only imagine if I'm that guy, that I'm going to do that as a matter of convenience. So we've got to address that better. And you know, probably our worst actors on this are the two that aren't on this call, which are Comcast and AT&T. So, you know, they're probably the biggest offenders to this. And so I don't think either one's on this call. And that's part of a part, that says a lot. So leave it there.
Hey, Bess.
Yes, go on.
Just a couple of comments, and
Sure.
I appreciate Colonel DeLapp's penetrating analysis of what the problem is. The problem is, even in District 5, we've spent millions of dollars on sidewalks.
Everybody has.
It's not just installing new ones, it's fixing the old ones. And there are only two things that are going to crack a sidewalk: trees and trucks. Those are the only two things that are going to crack a sidewalk. And the trees are not going to crack new sidewalks. It's the trucks that are cracking the sidewalks. And there are some locations, and I know Linda can bear me out on this, there are some locations that I'm aware of where we repeatedly have trucks pulling over on the sidewalks on the same locations. And I would, again, legislative solutions to these problems are generally like taking a sledgehammer to a fly. It's not what we need is voluntary compliance with the law. And I just say to everybody on this call, if we don't get voluntary compliance with the law, you're going to force us to pull out the sledgehammer. That's just the way it is. We're spending millions and millions of dollars. And I can't tell you how angry it makes me to have spent $2 or $3 million in District 5 on sidewalks and have some guy in a 2.5 ton truck pull over and crack them all up. It makes me very angry. And so I would just urge all of those on this call to get behind this. And the thing about it is, I would rather if you have to get over there, whether you're working on the aerial lines or not, if you have a big truck, get a traffic management plan and stay on the road instead of pulling over on our sidewalks and cracking them all up. Thank you, Mrs. Chairman.
Yes.
Gina.
Yeah, Joel, I hear you and I raise you. It may get to the point where the only way we can make people comply is to require them all to do what everybody else has to do, which is to put together, a traffic plan and present it that way. Because we've been going through this for how long now, trying to get people to voluntarily do what they're supposed to do. And of course, not everybody's a bad actor. We're making some headway, but the unfortunate thing is the word's just not drilling down to those who continually park on the sidewalks and crack them and damage them. I get the pictures all the time and I send them in. It really is very, very frustrating. I know Shane, I think, had mentioned that there is no pedestrian traffic control plan, or is there? I don't know that when, these companies are going out to do maybe just some light maintenance or something, they're not thinking any sort of pedestrian obstruction plan. They're just going to go out and do their work. Now, if they're obstructing traffic, if they're going to be out in the street, then yeah, they're probably thinking about, I've got to file some sort of plan with the city. But they're not thinking about, I'm going to just go park on the sidewalk and I've got to file some sort of plan. That's obviously not happening. And I doubt that anybody's, thinking about that. I think Colonel DeLapp hit the nail on the head with this. And so did Shane. And, larger cultural and behavioral. So far, what we've done just hasn't really been working. And the more sidewalks we put in, the more repairs we make, we're just going to continue to be more frustrated with the damage. And I just don't see how much longer we can wait for people to voluntarily comply before we do something more drastic.
Oh, and I would just like to add one thing, and that is that you would not believe how many times I go out to confront someone who's parked on the sidewalks that is right next to a driveway or a cul-de-sac or I mean, they just, like Shane was saying, it's sort of or Jim, it's sort of a behavioral thing that they almost feel entitled, or it's their right because they're under their lines. And I've asked them, you know, like I'll ask them, I'll say, you know, is there any way that you can move over to the driveway and do your work? And they can, and they do, you know, after a few nice words. But they realize they can do that, but it's just ingrained that they just pull right up on the sidewalks. And then, like I said, we have private citizens that are confronting these people that it doesn't always, a lot of them are very nice and move, but you know, sometimes it just kind of gets a little ugly. And it's, you know, it's sort of an uncomfortable situation. You've got private citizens trying to enforce the city ordinances.
Shane, I have a question if I get clarification on. Did I understand that when utility comes in to do just everyday type of maintenance, they don't have to check in with the city with any kind of plan? So right there's the breakdown too. Did I understand that correctly with as their agreements go?
Yeah, so, I mean, and the main reason why I brought this up too is that some things come in and they don't go through like the normal right-of-way permitting process. If it's maintenance on existing lines or them strictly running aerial lines, they do not, you know, get a right-of-way permit. Now, regardless, whether they get a permit, whether they're required to get a permit because they're doing work on the ground, underground, that kind of thing, or they're doing the aerial or maintenance items, if they get out into the road, they have to get a traffic control plan, or they have to submit a traffic control plan. When they're getting it, when they have a right-of-way permit, typically that's reviewed as part of the permit process. Whenever it's done on these more maintenance and aerial lines, they're supposed to be notifying traffic engineering a handful of days ahead of time with their TCP, you know, the traffic control plan, so that traffic engineering can vet and say that it's okay for the time frame. You know, suppose there's something else that's going on, like a special event, and for whether it's adequate, you know, enough for what they're actually doing out there. And you know, like what councilman, what other council persons were saying is that TCPs are really more related to getting out in the roadway and obstructing traffic, not really a consideration I thought giving to obstructing the sidewalk and where you're going to park your trucks and your equipment and where you're going to lay your materials down. And so from a permitting practice standpoint, you know, it wouldn't necessarily be a TCP, but, you know, be something I would term maybe a mobilization plan or something to that effect.
Right. But
you know,
but
again,
the
that's
way they've been, if it's cultural, they've sort of been looking at it as something that they just go in and it's something they can do in 30, 40 minutes. That doesn't mean it doesn't take out the sidewalk, but they're just parking there. They're out of the street. So they, you know, they didn't need to talk to anybody in traffic engineering. It's almost like we're encouraging those everyday maintenance type things, which is why it's happening all over the city. We don't discourage it, in other words. It almost makes it easier for them to get to their equipment and get to their infrastructure.
Yeah, I would certainly say we don't encourage it, but what I would also say.
Well, no, I'm not saying that you would bless it, but it's certainly something that they can skip a lot of steps by doing it this way.
Let me ask the question this way. And I don't know if this is for Shane or who it's really for, but maybe Chris. There is, let me see how to say it. That there is a prohibition. There's an ordinance that prohibits
parking
people
on
parking on
sidewalks.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 a year, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes, sir. There's.
Yes. We've got the law. We got the law.
So every time we see a truck parked on a sidewalk, they are violating a city ordinance.
Yes. Correct.
Then
Yes.
then why aren't they required to get some kind of traffic management plan? Because if they can't be on the sidewalk, well, I guess if there was no sidewalk, they could pull off onto the right of way. But anytime they're going to do any work where there's a sidewalk, they have to get a traffic management plan because they can't pull onto the sidewalk.
And Chris, could they get a citation by the police department for being on the sidewalk?
Yes, yes,
So
They
I don't see why not.
yes.
But we
But you
have to get
catch
the
'em.
police,
You got,
we have to get the police officers over there.
right.
And I don't know that all the police officers understand, or they probably have better things to do as well, but they don't necessarily understand that this is a city violation where these trucks can't be parked on the
Municipal
sidewalk.
law.
We have called them before and they have been successful in getting these folks to move, but kind of like what Linda said, if everybody else has to abide by these laws, then why are we letting the big utilities get away with it every day?
So that's an education we need to do to our own police force and make sure that they know. So if they're driving by and they see it, and for folks like Linda and others, they can, she doesn't have to become the actual police. She could just call the police, not the emergency line, but call the police and say, hey, could you send a cruiser by and address this issue of this truck on the thing? But if we educate the police, patrolmen, that when you see that, you need to come up and give them a courtesy, get off the sidewalk. And if they are continued violators or they, don't want to do it, well, then they can cite them. So the enforcement piece, there's an education piece and then an enforcement piece that needs to be done. I don't know that we need a new additional language if we've already got one in place that covers this, personally.
I agree. The law's there.
We just need to enforce what we actually have on the books and educate. But and we're going to do that on our end with Shayla, Shane, Nick. When we communicate with these utilities, part of it's just constantly reminding them and getting the word out to their folks. And we have to do that because look, the drivers and or their subcontractors don't necessarily. They're going to do what's most convenient for them. They're not going to do what but if they know they might get a ticket for it, well, they might think twice.
Well, it's not so much just the subcontractors. I think the main companies who hire the subcontractors have to be made or have to be held responsible. Because if we don't do something to first tell all of the companies that are doing work on the rights of ways, the main companies, that we are going to cite you if we see your truck or your subcontractor's truck parked on the sidewalk. It is illegal. Cite the ordinance and ticket them, make them responsible, because the word is not trickling down to these subcontractors, especially if they're coming in from out of town. I mean, what do they care about our sidewalks?
Right.
Chris has been working on something because we were trying to figure out how to better hold the various companies responsible. And he was looking at that with some right-of-way information, and Chris sent it out to everybody. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not, and also had some information on what other cities are doing. I just think we've got to get a handle on this because Linda and her folks or any other citizens who are out and about don't need to go confronting these people who are parked on sidewalks, because it can get ugly, and it has gotten ugly, and they don't need to put themselves in jeopardy. It's the city's responsibility to make sure that these folks are doing what they're supposed to do one way or the other. And so far, the voluntary compliance hadn't worked.
Yeah, but the issue is not really an absence of legislation. The issue is enforcement. Isn't that right, Chris?
Well, I mean, yeah, there's an existing ordinance that says you can't drive over the sidewalk or obstruct the sidewalk, and it could definitely be enforced. There's an ordinance that says you have to repair a sidewalk that you damage. Actually, it says within 24 hours, which I know is not realistic at all. And there's another ordinance, a general penalty ordinance, that anybody that violates any ordinance of the city, if there's not otherwise a specific penalty, can have up to a $500 fine. That's sort of the overview thing. And I did come up with a option to put it into right-of-way ordinance, which is this is definitely the sledgehammer. Should y'all choose to go down that route, I think it needs that, what I came up with ought to be vetted. See if it, it's just me making up an idea. I don't know if it'll work in the real world or not.
Councilwoman Rich.
Yes.
If I could just comment, I just
Sure.
looked very quickly at Chris's proposal, and I would certainly want to discuss it with the Jim DeLapp and his staff. I think that the problem is that a lot of the vehicles that are parking on the sidewalk are not working on permits, and they're annual security that's given by certain utility companies. So I think it would require a lot of just some thought and refinement.
Sure, absolutely. No, if the council's gonna come up with something, we have to make sure it can be enforced and that it can work in the real world. We get it. But, this certainly is an issue because all council people have invested city tax dollars into fixing, repairing, and creating new sidewalks. It's really quite, if we add it up, it's millions and millions of dollars over the last 7 years or 6 years or so. So it's very important. And so it's something I think we should work towards, and if it takes legislation or protocol within the established permits, it's really important that we have something in place that we know citizens can either pick up the phone and call and get it taken care of, or it's just that utilities learn that it's punitive to do it otherwise. So,
Councilwoman Richard, the last thing I'll say is those utilities on this call, are probably taking note and making sure they're going to get the word out. And so, and nothing makes them pay more attention when they start getting a bill from the city for, thousands of dollars for every incident. And we send them a bill every month for here's the vehicles with a picture that we saw on the sidewalks of your truck on this sidewalk at this time and date. And we send them the bill for the damaged sidewalks. If $500 an incident, that adds up pretty quick. I mean, and when they start writing checks for thousands of dollars, I'm guessing they'll probably get the word out to their employees not to drive on the sidewalk. So, again, I don't know that we need more legislation. I think we need to enforce the stuff we already have and follow through.
I agree.
And that will address the problem.
I agree. And Linda, thank you for staying on top of this and your passion on making things, really function the way they should when we're spending our capital dollars throughout our city. So thank you for your time. Is there anyone else present that has anything else to add to this committee meeting? Any council member or want to wrap anything up or whatever? I think we're a work in progress, particularly because of Chris's interest and what he sent to this council, and then hopefully to the administration if there is something. And lacking any additional legislation, maybe just an understanding. So when citizens call us about an incident, we'll know how to direct them, because that's usually how the council interplays with these kind of activities. And I thank everyone for their time. And unless there's any objection, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
A second.
Okay. All righty. Well, thank you all very, very much for your time. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye now.